I never would have gone if I'd known the others weren't coming. Spring break was always a ritual for us. 5 friends, 1 rented house, and no rules. That year, we were supposed to meet in a sleepy coastal town called Ashcliff Haven. I'd never heard of it, and the name didn't exactly scream beach parties and booze. But Gabe swore it was peaceful and cheap. That's all we needed. But plans change. Sickness, flight cancellations, family emergencies. One by one, everyone backed out. I was already 3 hours into the drive when I found out I'd be alone. By then, I figured why not. I had the time off work, I'd already prepaid half the cost, and a week of quiet by the ocean didn't sound so bad. The house stood on the outskirts of the town, on a crumbling stretch of coast where the cliffs loomed tall and the wind never stopped. It was old, pre-electricity kind of old, with warped floorboards and windows that didn't quite shut. But it had charm in that neglected seaside way. You could hear the surf even from inside. A deep, pulsing presence just beyond the wall. The first night, I drank half a bottle of wine and fell asleep to the sound of waves slamming the rocks below. It should have been peaceful, but I woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with the unmistakable sense that someone had just left the room. I told myself it was just the dream, something about water rushing into the hallway, lapping at my bedposts, something cold brushing my hand beneath the sheets. In the morning, I tried not to think about it. Ashcliff Haven wasn't what I'd expected. The town was practically empty, even for off-season. Stores were shuttered, and the streets had a dusty, unused quality, like props from a stage set abandoned halfway through the performance. I passed only one person that day, an old man walking a dog that wasn't leashed. The dog stopped in the road and stared at me, eyes cloudy and unblinking. The man kept walking. He didn't even turn around. That night, the wind picked up. It howled through the gaps in the windows, sounding almost like distant whistling. I left the lights on. When I woke the next day, the beach had changed. A line of small black stones formed a perfect spiral in the sand, right at the base of the cliffs. Not something washed in by the tide, these were too carefully placed. I thought maybe some local artist had done it. A beach mandala, or whatever that's called. But it didn't feel decorative. It felt ritualistic, precise. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't been there the day before. Each day that followed, the spiral grew. By midweek, it had curled 3 full turns inward, with strange symbols carved into the wet sand between the arms. I never saw anyone down there. The beach always looked untouched, no footprints but my own. Yet every morning, the spiral had grown deeper, darker, closer to the base of the cliff wall. And that wasn't all. The house changed too, subtly. A faint smell of seaweed began to cling to the walls. Things moved slightly when I wasn't looking. A fork facing the wrong way on the table. A chair turned toward the window I swore I hadn't opened. Once, I heard something heavy drag across the floor upstairs, even though I hadn't gone up since I arrived. I told myself I was unraveling. Too much solitude. Too much wind and silence and nothing to hold on to. But on Thursday night, I dreamed of the spiral. Only it wasn't made of stones this time. It was made of bones. Rib cages, femurs, vertebrae, all arranged in a perfect curl on the beach. In the center, a figure stood facing the cliff wall. It didn't move. It didn't speak. But I woke up gasping with the taste of salt in my mouth and my feet soaked. When I turned on the lights, my bedsheets were wet. Not sweat. Cold, briny water. I didn't leave. I should have. I even packed a bag that morning, locked the front door behind me, and got into the car. But I didn't turn the key. Something pulled me back. Not fear. Not curiosity. Something like gravity. I went back down to the beach, drawn by an ache I couldn't explain. The spiral had reached the cliffs. The stones now lined a narrow gap I hadn't seen before. An opening in the rock, just wide enough for a person to slip through. Inside, it was darker than it should have been. I stepped in, just for a moment, just to look. The stone walls were damp and close. The spiral continued inside, this time made of shells and brittle driftwood. It led deeper, curving down into the earth. I took 3 steps, and the sea behind me went silent. That was the worst part. The absence of the waves, like the ocean was holding its breath. I turned and left, heart pounding. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, with the lights on, and just stared at the door, waiting for something I couldn't name. The spiral came into the house on the final morning. Small stones, perfectly round, trailed from the front door to the center of the living room, coiled tight like a sleeping snake. At the center sat a single object, a smooth piece of bone carved into a shape I didn't recognize. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. But I knelt beside it for hours. Breath shallow, palms sweating, unable to look away. That evening, the wind stopped. So did the ocean. Not silence. Absence. A void where sound should have been. When I finally looked out the window, the sea was gone. Not low tide, gone. Nothing but wet sand stretching to the horizon, glistening under a cloudless, red-tinged sky. The spiral was gone too, and in its place stood the figure from my dream, staring directly at the house. I closed all the doors, turned every lock, covered every mirror. But still, it got in. Not through the door, not through the windows, through the floor. It rose from the knots in the wood like smoke. Not a person, not even a presence, just intention. Old and impossible and patient. It whispered something I didn't hear, but I understood anyway. It had been waiting. For me. The next morning, the ocean was back. So were the waves. The town even looked a little brighter, like nothing had ever happened. But the house was different. The air was heavier, like the whole place was listening. I left that day. I didn't take anything, didn't look back. I've never told anyone what happened. Not really. But sometimes, I wake up with sand under my nails and water in my lungs. And once a year, around spring break, I find a perfect black stone outside my door. I never touch it, but the spiral keeps growing. I took the trip to forget. It was supposed to be just a few quiet nights in the mountains, a solo Thanksgiving retreat away from the pitying looks and awkward silences of friends and family. My wife, Denise, had passed away in July. Sudden aneurysm, no warning. One moment, she was texting me about what to make for dinner, and the next, she was gone. I thought I could handle the silence better than their well-meaning voices. White Pines Inn sat perched on a ridge in northern Vermont. I booked it last minute. The owner, a man named Gregory, told me the inn was normally full for the holidays, but this year, everyone canceled due to a freak blizzard. Everyone but me. The place was beautiful in that faded postcard kind of way. Colonial woodwork, squeaky floorboards, and the smell of cinnamon and pine everywhere. I arrived the night before Thanksgiving, with snow already falling in thick, lazy flakes. Gregory greeted me at the door with a tired smile. "You're lucky. Roads are closing by midnight," he said. "You'll have the whole inn to yourself." "Just me?" "Well," he said, glancing up the stairs. "Almost. I chalked it up to the staff, or maybe another late guest. Didn't matter. I just wanted a warm bed and solitude." Room 6 was at the end of the hall, on the second floor. It was cozy, old-fashioned, like the rest of the inn. Heavy red drapes, a carved headboard, a rocking chair in the corner that creaked every time I walked past it, even when I didn't touch it. The first night passed uneventfully. I sipped brandy and read Denise's favorite book until my eyes blurred. I didn't even realize I'd fallen asleep until I woke at about 2 a.m. The room felt different, colder. The rocking chair was swaying slowly in the dark. I watched it for a long time, too tired to be afraid, and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I found a note outside my door. No envelope, just a folded piece of yellowing paper with spidery handwriting. "Don't let her in." I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed. A prank, I thought. Gregory probably left it to mess with the lone guest. When I asked him about it over breakfast, he froze mid-step. "You found a note?" he said, setting down a tray of eggs and sausage. "On your door?" I nodded. "Yeah, just sitting there. Kind of creepy, to be honest." His expression darkened. What room did I put you in again? 6. His face drained of color. Damn it. I wasn't supposed to use that room. What do you mean? I asked. He pulled out a chair across from me and sat down slowly, like his knees had suddenly stopped working. The inn's been empty all week. I didn't even think about it. I just grabbed the key without looking. I try never to book room 6. Why? He hesitated, then sighed. We don't like to talk about her. The inn's old, built in 1860. A lot of history. Room 6 used to be part of the servants' quarters. One of the girls, Jane, she went mad. They say she murdered a guest, carved him up with a bread knife while he slept. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for the punchline. They locked her in that room after, he continued. No police back then, just town justice. Boarded the door, left her to starve. Some say she's still there, still knocking, wanting someone to let her out. But the door's open now, I said, trying to sound more amused than uneasy. Gregory looked pale. They sealed another door. There's a second one hidden behind the wardrobe. Don't move it, no matter what. I didn't answer. This was either the best or worst innkeeper hospitality I'd ever received. That night, the knocking started. Soft, tentative, like a child at first. Then more urgent. 4 knocks, pause, then 2, over and over. I pulled the covers up to my chest and stared at the wardrobe. The next morning, another note lay on the floor just inside my door. I'm so cold. Please. I didn't mention it to Gregory. Instead, I moved the wardrobe. Behind it was the faint outline of a door. Old, gray wood, sealed with rusted nails and something like wax. I placed my ear against it. Silence. Then, just as I turned away, a whisper. Help me. My skin crawled. The voice was weak, distant, like it had traveled centuries just to reach me. I slept with the lamp on that night. The knocking began again at midnight. 4 knocks. 2. 4. 2. It continued for hours. At 3:17 a.m. it stopped. I held my breath. Silence filled the room. Then, the rasp of something sharp against the wood. Not frantic, measured, almost thoughtful, like claws tracing invisible symbols into the grain, etching their way closer with each pass. That was when I saw the 3rd note. You'll be thankful if you keep it closed. Thanksgiving Day. The snow was relentless. No chance of leaving. The road was buried. I paced the room, too anxious to eat, too scared to sleep. By nightfall, the knocking began again. Harder, faster. My resolve shattered around 2 a.m. I stood in front of the door, heart racing. I tapped the wood. Silence, then a whisper. Thank you. The wardrobe rocked violently. A gust of cold air swept through the room, though the windows were sealed shut. The lights flickered. The door began to creak open, nails and wax popping loose one by one. I turned to run, but I couldn't move. Something held me. From the crack in the door, a hand emerged. Rotting, fingers black at the tips. It gripped the edge of the door, pulling it wider. Then I saw her face. Gaunt, hollow eyes, skin stretched tight over bone, her mouth open in an eternal scream. But she didn't scream. I saved you a seat, she whispered, and I was gone. I don't know how long I was unconscious, maybe hours. When I woke, the wardrobe was back in place. No door, no notes. Gregory wouldn't speak to me. He just handed me a receipt and said, "The storm's passed. You should leave." So I did. But every Thanksgiving since, I hear knocking. 4, pause, 2, and I find a note on my kitchen table the next morning. You let me in. And I know, one day, she'll come collect. I booked the hotel stay to escape turning 40. Not because I dreaded the number, but because I dreaded the calls, the cake, and the jokes about getting old. I wanted the day to pass quietly, without anyone singing at me over a wax-covered dessert. My birthday fell on a Thursday, which made it perfect. Quiet season, no families crowding the hallways. The Halberd Hotel had been featured in travel magazines for its towering Art Deco facade and timeless elegance. That was the phrase they used, though the black and white photographs in the lobby suggested something less romantic. The air inside the hotel smelled different to what you'd have expected for such a getaway. A faint smell of salt water mixed with old polish clung to the velvet drapes. The desk clerk slid a brass key across the counter without asking for identification, the motion almost ceremonial. Room 1313. I hesitated before taking it. The number wasn't charming. It felt deliberate, as though they were waiting for me to notice it. The elevator to the upper floors moved in jerks, accompanied by a low hum that vibrated in my ribs. When the doors opened, the 13th floor was silent, the kind of silence that presses against the skin. The carpet runner had worn thin along a narrow path straight down the middle, and the light seemed to dim the farther I walked. Room 1313 was at the very end, its door slightly open. Inside, everything was arranged perfectly. The bedspread smoothed so tightly it could have been painted on, the curtains drawn halfway, the light falling in a thin, cold strip across the carpet. A single white balloon floated in the far corner, tethered by a curled ribbon. I hadn't mentioned my birthday to anyone, not when booking and not at check-in. Still, I told myself it was a kind gesture, perhaps a complimentary touch for a lone guest. That first night passed quietly until just after midnight, when I woke to a noise. A soft scraping sound. It came from the wall behind the bed, steady at first, then irregular, as if pausing to listen. My hand pressed against the headboard. The wood was cold. I tapped once without thinking. The sound stopped immediately. In the morning, the balloon was gone. In its place on the desk sat a small white box. Inside was a slice of cake, vanilla with pale frosting. No utensils, no note. I left it untouched. The rain began on the second evening, a soft drizzle at first, then heavier, rattling against the wide window. The scrapes returned, but now it seemed closer to the floor, moving in short bursts. I realized it wasn't exactly behind the bed, it was beneath it, traveling upward as if following the wall toward me. Near midnight, a different sound joined it. The low drag of something heavy across carpet outside my door. I froze in bed, every nerve drawn taut. The air smelled faintly of burnt sugar and something older, like fabric left to mildew in a sealed trunk. I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it. Somewhere down the corridor, soft feet shifted on the worn runner. When I cracked the door open, the hallway seemed longer than it had the day before, stretching away into a blur of shadow. About 20 feet down, a figure stood facing the wall. Small, slight, its pale garment hanging loose. It didn't sway, didn't acknowledge me, but its head tilted ever so slightly toward the wallpaper, as though listening for something deep inside it. I retreated, closed the door, and dragged a chair beneath the handle. The scraping inside the wall resumed immediately. Faster now, a steady climb toward the headboard. I didn't sleep. When I stepped into the hall at dawn, the air felt colder, thinner. The figure was gone, but the balloon had returned to my room. Only now there were 13 of them, all white, each ribbon brushing the carpet as if stirred by some breath I couldn't feel. I didn't check out through the front desk. I left the key on the nightstand and took the stairs down 13 flights. Outside, the fog was thicker than before, the harbor lights blurred into smudges of dull gold. I turned back to look at the hotel and felt my stomach twist. From the street, the Halberd had only 12 floors. In my pocket, the key was still there, though I knew I'd left it in the room. Its brass tag no longer read 1313, just 13. That was 2 years ago. Every birthday since, I've found a white balloon in my apartment before midnight, always tied with the same curling ribbon, always one more than the year before. Last year, there were 13. This year, I've already found the first balloon, waiting in the corner when I woke this morning. The scraping has started again, faint but persistent, in the wall beside my bed. It's higher than before. It's nearly at the top. And I know that when it reaches me, it won't be scraping anymore.